If you want to understand what the US is doing around Venezuela, do not start with rumors. Start with logistics. Because logistics is the part governments struggled to fake. Here is the cleanest signal. A U.S. naval base in Puerto Rico that was closed for more than 20 years, Roosevelt Roads, was reopened and active again in November 2025. CBS described it as part of a broader Caribbean buildup, with locals literally hearing the jets. CBS News. So the real question is not, is an invasion happening tomorrow? The question is, why rebuild a staging area at all? And what kind of operation does that staging area support? Let's walk through it the same way planners do. Bases, airspace, ships. Then, the political objective. First, the base problem. Roosevelt Roads sits in Ceiba on the east side of Puerto Rico. It is close enough to support constant flights, but far enough to be a protected hub. Reuters, reporting in 2025, showed F-35s landing there during the buildup. Reuters, and it is not just Puerto Rico. The U.S. Virgin Islands matter because they give you extra runway options and dispersal. In 2025, U.S. Special Operations exercises explicitly trained on taking control of Henry E. Rolson Airport on St. Croix to receive follow-on aircraft. That kind of training is not proof of an invasion by itself, but it is the exact muscle memory you build for contingency operations. Defense 1+1, now fast forward to this week. On January 3, 2026, reporting tied regional airspace restrictions and disruptions at the Virgin Islands airports to U.S. military activity connected to Venezuela, with normal flights later resuming after temporary FAA restrictions were lifted. WTJX Newsfeed +1. So what does that tell you? It tells you the U.S. wanted controlled airspace, protected logistics lanes, and flexible launch points. That is what you set up when you want options. Second, the ships. People argue online about which destroyer is where, but the bigger point is the mix of capabilities. In September 2025, a Defense Department statement cited by regional reporting confirmed multiple U.S. Navy ships in the region, including destroyers like USS Jason Dunham and USS Gravely, and also named the Iwo Jima Amphibious Ready Group with the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit. Plus, the cruiser, USS Lake Erie, moving under U.S. Southern Command, tasking, VPM. That combination matters. Destroyers and cruisers help you control air and sea lanes. They also carry the sensors and missile defense that protect everything else. But amphibious forces change the meaning of the posture. Amphibious groups are built around Marines, helicopters, and aircraft that move people onto territory, seize key points, and sustain pressure. That does not automatically mean full-scale occupation. It does mean the U.S. is keeping a door open for raids, seizures, rescues, and rapid entry missions. Third, the air campaign logic. When you hear plans, most people picture a map with arrows. Planners picture time. How fast can you generate sorties? How long can you keep aircraft over target? How quickly can you rearm, refuel, and launch again? That is where forward hubs like Puerto Rico matter, and it is where tankers, cargo planes, and drones quietly decide what is possible. And now, we get to the hardest part. The objective. For years, U.S. policy toward Maduro has mixed sanctions, diplomatic pressure, and counter-narcotics claims. But in late 2025 and early 2026, reporting described a sharper turn. Sanctions aimed at oil networks and tankers, plus actions described as a blockade or maritime quarantine by different outlets. AP News +1. Reuters reported on January 3, 2026, that U.S. forces carried out a strike tied to extracting Maduro, and that Maduro was captured, according to President Trump's statement, while also noting Venezuelan oil facilities were reportedly operating normally afterward. Reuters. So if you are watching this and thinking, okay, plans are one thing, but this sounds like action, you are not wrong to separate the two. Here's the clean way to frame it. There are 3 levels of U.S. military pressure that can all look like invasion prep from a distance. Level 1. Interdiction and economic choking. That is seizures, tanker pressure, tighter air and sea control, and using ships as floating law enforcement platforms. Level 2. Limited strikes and raids. That is hitting a facility, grabbing a person, destroying a specific capability, then leaving. No attempt to hold territory. Level 3. Sustained entry. That is where amphibious force is, air superiority, and continuous logistics turn into a long operation with political end goals. What makes people nervous is that the same posture can support all 3. The difference is the decision, not the hardware. Now, What about Venezuela's ability to respond? Venezuela is not trying to beat the U.S. ship. The likely play is to complicate the environment. That means using geography, hiding systems among civilian patterns, pushing militia mobilization, and relying on irregular networks that survive even when formal units get hit. It also means political warfare, messaging, alliances, and trying to make the operation costly in headlines, even if it is manageable on the battlefield. And that brings us to the outside actors. The competitor script you shared frames Russia and China as the big triggers. The safer way to say it is this: outside relationships can raise the perceived stakes, even when the visible activity is only logistics and counter-narcotics framing. So what are the invasion plans? Explained in plain English. It is not one plan. It is a menu of options, enabled by reopened bases, controlled airspace, a naval posture that can defend itself, and marine forces that can move fast. And the biggest tell is not a dramatic speech. It is whether the U.S. keeps expanding the boring parts: fuel, cargo flow, runway access, airspace restrictions, and sustained presence. One last thing before you go. When you hear confident claims like the decision has already been made, treat that as entertainment language, unless it is tied to dated sourcing. The real world usually moves in steps, and the steps are what we just walked through. So here is my question for you. Do you think the U.S. posture around Venezuela is mainly about counter-narcotics, mainly about oil leverage, or mainly about removing a government it sees as hostile? If you want to see more, click the subscribe button and like. Recent reporting tied to the Venezuela escalation